I'd like to welcome everybody to today's webinar. We're excited to have you. Today is 4A's webinar, Business as Unusual, Unveiling the Future, How Agencies Are Leveraging Generative AI. As we all see every day, there are headlines on how generative AI is transforming the advertising landscape. But I think for many of us, the big question remains on just how are agencies translating its potential into practical applications. Today, we're lucky enough to have three different agency leaders with us: Jason Snyder, Global CTO of IPG Shop Momentum Worldwide; Mike Barrett, founder and CSO of independent agency Supernatural; and Lane Harris, Director of Innovation and Technology for independent agency VIA. Each is going to share their journey and speak to their strategies for assessing and integrating generative AI into their workflows and products. A few housekeeping notes: we are recording today's session and it will make it available on the 4A's website. Additionally, we're going to have time at the end for audience questions, so please be sure to use the Q&A feature in your Zoom toolbar to submit questions. Because each of our speakers represents a very different type of organization with different approaches, I've asked each just to do a quick setup on how they're using AI in their agencies, just to set the stage before we dive into our conversation. And with that, Mike, I'm going to ask you to talk about Supernatural first. Thank you all for being with us today. Mike, you're on mute.
Literally think I'd never done a Zoom meeting before. Okay, so Supernatural is an independent agency. We're built on a tech stack that is comprised of basically multiple forms of artificial intelligence and multiple sources of data. We have built an integration layer between the two of them to make it really easy and practical to use artificial intelligence across all stages of the sort of agency creative development process. If you go to the next slide, you can just sort of see the main idea of what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to go faster and be more effective. And I'll walk you through how we do it in a step-by-step way. We are super focused on practical applications. Next slide, please. There's a lot of hot air about AI and a lot of hand waving, a lot of hand wringing. It's a tool. The metaphor that I always use, Molly's heard me say it a million times. It's like, if you're a carpenter, there are hand saws and there are power saws. AI is just a power saw that lets you go faster. You're still doing the same things and you still need a human in charge, but we use it to do competitive analyses that are faster and more accurate than ones we could do on our own. We use it to create audiences out of data that we can talk to and ask questions of. We use it to define strategy, to give us different strategy options based on client and market inputs. We actually don't use it to develop campaign ideas. That's something that creative humans do really, really well, but AIs are still not great at coming up with the sort of just do it or got milk. But once we have the campaign idea, we can dimensionalize that campaign and blow it out across different channels really easily. And we use it to develop communications plans. So I'll just step through each one of these really, really quickly. So if we start with the competitive analysis, we gather up, next slide, please, all of the competitive advertising or marketing in a category. We feed it to the machine and we ask the machine really straightforward questions. How does this category talk? What does it talk about? What colors does it use? What are the open areas in the category? And what comes back is on the next slide. Oh, no. Next slide. I already did this one. What comes back is a visualization of how the competitors are positioning themselves. Can a human do this? Absolutely. Can a human do it in 5 minutes? Absolutely not. And what this is a really good starting point for, sort of analysis of the category. So that's how we handle competitive. Next slide. We'll talk about how we define and execute audience insight. We will build an audience out of data. We have access to a massive amount of audience data, 377,000 individuals in the US. We create the audiences in the data stack, and then we animate them using artificial intelligence. Next slide, please. We can actually talk to them when we have questions. We just ask. What you're looking at here is an audience that we created for our Carbone client. Right now, the way these work is you type questions and the machine answers them. What is not visualized here, but which is really handy, is you can also pop up the data that's driving the answers. So you can get a sense for why these avatars are answering questions the way they are. We use this for everything for understanding how audience decision making is made, how audiences make decisions to, we can take advertising, put it back in front of these audiences, get a sense for how they're responding to the stuff we're creating. It's all very helpful. It's all very fast, and it provides a better starting point for just the creative process. Next slide, please. Once we have the competitive and the audience piece squared away, we're ready to develop strategy. We do that in an interactive workshop with our clients that we host in the platform. Next slide. What comes back is a strategic path. So we go through, and I think the next slide is animated, which is will be helpful. Yeah. So this is a session from one of our hospital clients. You answer the questions that you would normally answer, right? Who are you competing against? Who's your audience? How do they make decisions? All these different things. This is obviously informed by the data that you've pulled in the first couple steps, but you can adjust it just as you would in a normal engagement with your client. But in about 45 minutes, you go through each of these, and then it'll come back and it'll say, okay, like, here are the different options for you. And you can say, all right, I like this one, or I don't like that one. You thumbs up them, you thumbs down them. And then you can pop them up and you can say, it'll tell you why it developed them or why it recommended them. Then what you can do is take the audience that you created in step 2, attach it, and then assign the AI to write you a creative brief or write you a strategy presentation. And it'll start writing you the beginnings of a brief, and it'll tell you, here's how this will appeal to the audience. Here's how this will differentiate you from your competitors. This is what works well. This is what doesn't. This is what to look out for. So then when we have that, then obviously we're ready for creative development, which is the next step. This is just it, writing the brief and doing what I just said. It's talking about the audience appeal and whatnot. Then we get to the creative development idea. You can see on the next slide, effectively represented by our friend Don Draper. We still use humans for this. It's rare that you get a really good creative idea out of a machine, but once you do have it and you're ready to develop it across platforms, that's when we can train our platform on the idea. And next slide, please. That's where the creative generator comes into play. So I think what you're going to see is on the next slide. Yeah. So you can train the platform on the campaign. You can train, and you can get all sorts of outputs out of it. So this is the example of a video script. You give it the brief that was written, you give it the audience, you give it references, and then it comes back to you with options for scripts or social objects or display advertising or whatever. And you're able to work in the platform and edit it. You put all this together, you add it all up, and what you've done is you've taken a significant amount of the grunt work out of developing advertising. That's really what it's about. And it's about being practical at every step of the way. There's nothing like magical here. We're just trying to use AI to do the things that AI is good at. Next slide, please. I think that's, yeah. Oh, the other thing is it lets you version stuff by market. So big benefit. So what everybody worries about when, you show them this kind of stuff is like, oh my God, like, if we're in the business of selling time and it's only taking us a quarter of the time, aren't clients going to ask us for huge cuts? And what we found instead is far more common is that they ask you to version campaigns, tailor them to different audiences, tailor them by market. And this is just an example of us doing this for Zipcar. We had this Zip If campaign, and year 1 was Zip If, and then sort of reason for using Zipcar. and year two became much more about regionalizing it and making it relevant to individual markets. So Nathan Manilow Sculpture Park in Chicago, Mount Sinai, Seattle, Bethesda Crab House in DC. You get the point. Just making it relevant. So that's it. That's what we focus on. Just trying to make it practical, trying to make it easy to use. The benefit of it is, it takes a lot of the grunt work out of everything we do all day long.
Wonderful. All right, Jason, I'm going to ask you to go next.
Thanks, Molly, and thanks so much for inviting me, and thanks everybody for joining today. I put together some slides. I'm going to start just first to talk about myself, so everybody knows who I am. I'm the Global Chief Technology Officer at Momentum Worldwide, part of the Interpublic Group. In my remit at IPG, I sit on both the Data Council and the AI Steering Council that is across IPG, helping to determine the future of how we're using data and AI inside of the work that we do. I also sit on the board of an IPG company called The Famous Group, which is a mixed reality entertainment company that we own and deploy at events and concerts and sporting events, mixed reality, and also in live broadcast television. And my remit inside of Momentum as global CTO, I oversee obviously all of the technology work, the road mapping work, innovation, and then all of production ladders up into me. So that would be integrated production, creative technology, live events production, operational technology, content production, and studio efforts. With that that's me, and then I have a few slides explaining kind of who Momentum is and what we do. So we are an agency that believes that it's what brands do that matters, and we're very much action focused. Okay, go next. We are 27 offices, 21 countries, and more than 1,000 people globally. And what we have built is what we're considering a modern day experiential agency. So we do retail and connected commerce work. We do the experiential activations, emerging reality technologies, so multimodal technologies, physical computing, AR, VR, XR, entertainment, music, and gaming, so concerts and inside of gaming and inside of all kinds of events. And then we have a large portfolio of sponsorships and partnerships that we manage as well. So we look at every idea in the context of a total brand experience, and we segment those by culture, transaction, and amplification. And we have a lot of actions, not disciplines, inside of those buckets. And that is kind of our filter by which we activate. These are the companies we worked with, and we've won a bunch of awards. And what sets it apart, these are some interesting things. So, this year, campaign named us Agency of the Year. We have very sophisticated analytics and data tools that we use to measure events. Measuring events and experiences is perhaps one of the most complex metrics that we get into inside of advertising and marketing. There is, again, the multimodal nature of it, what's happening in physical reality, what's happening in blended reality, what's happening in immersive reality, virtual reality, and tying all those things together, looking at those attributes, building KPIs for clients, and tying identities and personalities together inside of those environments is a very complex thing. And we devote a lot of time, investment, and money into doing that. And then we are purpose-driven. So we have a lot of activities inside the organization that I'll share with you in kind of the next slides, where we are committed to sustainability and the environment and things like that. So we have 2 ISO certifications. We're the first experiential agency in the world to have sustainable event management systems and environmental management systems. We have our suppliers. We help our suppliers achieve their diversity and sustainability certifications. And we are maniacally focused on the environmental impact of all of the physical activations that we do. This slide, this eye chart, is actually one of my favorite slides, something that I'm proud of, because it kind of looks at more than a decade of work that we've done with emerging technologies, and kind of actually what you see on here, we could tie back to events, work that we've done for clients. And for the last couple of years, we've been focused, more than the last couple of years, probably for the last 8 years, we've been focused on machine learning. We've been focused more on AI, if there even is AI in the world today, for the last couple of years. And then most recently, we do a lot of work in quantum computing. So that's kind of about momentum, and this next bit is kind of our POV, and I've pulled some slides together about what our approach is as an agency, kind of how we frame things out, how we think about it, and how we ask the people at Momentum to think about AI. So lots of people are worried about technology replacing everyone in the world and replacing our jobs. And that's not a concern for us. Where we're focused is looking at AI as a companion for creativity, not to replace it. The person is still the most important part, and having that kind of human management and oversight of everything we do is always going to be the center of our work. So AI is the tool that enables the idea. It's never the idea itself. It's never AI for AI's sake or machine learning for machine learning's sake. It's about maintaining the brand integrity of all of the work. And, I kind of think of a brand as a metaphor for a story. It's our job to tell that story. And AI, it can be an amplifier for our ability to tell that story in new and interesting ways. And it's not just a tech team concern. So whatever role someone has at Momentum, they have the ability to talk about what AI is, what it could mean for our client, and what AI requires to be used in our work. And that's a lot of what I do and spend my time doing. So AI today, machine learning today, is sort of most widely applied in these three categories. Inside of our operations, to create efficiencies, where we use predictive tools and utilization tools to monitor what we're doing from a financial perspective, and to help with our staffing and hiring purposes. From a strategic perspective, we use AI to help visualize these experiences for our clients, and bring them to reality in a more accelerated way. And then, of course, in execution, we're using AI to help build memorable experiences. And you'll find it in a lot of the work that we're deploying now. And so that's me. And so this is true. This is often, I do a lot of these kinds of events and talk a lot. And the truth is that about 40% of my time now is spent dealing with attorneys, and attorneys both on the IPG corporate side and for our clients. And I'm sure today I'll be talking about it quite a bit, but transparency is the most important thing inside of AI. Accountability and indemnification, and understanding that every aspect of this technology can be understood, it can be exposed, and it can be demonstrated where the information that it produces comes from. And that is critically important to our clients, the brands we're working with, and to be able to operate within the legislative boundaries on a global basis, in America on a state, local, and federal basis. But more than that, to ensure that our clients and their constituents, consumers, or if it's B2B, whatever it is, that if they give consent to engage in our tools, our activations, our creative work that has AI in it, that they can understand that there is a transparency behind it, and that it's within the boundaries and frameworks of kind of the ethical boundaries of our clients and IPG as a corporation, as well as from a legislative perspective. And so a lot of my time is spent unwinding that and making sure that that level of hygiene and discipline is exemplary in the work that we do. That's it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Jason. All right, Lane, let's hear from you, and then we'll dive into our Q&A.
Yeah, thanks again for inviting me. Yeah, I know we're eager to jump into the discussion, so I'm going to keep mine super brief, since there is a little bit of overlap. Similar to both Jason and Mike, like, we're really embracing AI, but probably in just a little bit different way. I work for the VA agency, and we're a small agency. We've won Small Agency of the Year a few times. We often win Best Culture. It's a really kind of cool place to work. And we work with Fortune 100 companies in Portland, or Portland, Maine. I was Oregon. Portland, Maine. I'm in Maine. And in the way our approach to AI is really like we don't like maintain or develop any proprietary tools or anything like Mike does. We just really are, we kind of treat AI like production, where we go out, seek the stuff that we know has high quality use cases, and start and kind of integrating into the processes that we do. And just some examples, and very similar to, I think, both Mike and Jason, like as far as creative output, and we'll talk about that a little bit, that's not something that we're really like leaning into, but we are definitely using it on sort of the the intro of it, the creative end, things like strategy, the virtual audiences stuff, digital twinning, that's been very successful for us. Even like, rudimentary creative, like building storyboards, like putting, outlines together, just that, as Mike was sort of saying, the grunt work that goes into the creative process, anywhere possible, we're looking for like those type of efficiencies, as well as like even just like outside of creative, things like operations, we're utilizing it for, reviewing contracts, for developing boilerplate, for doing things that like, that we've all sort of decided that AI is actually pretty good at. Well as even in addition to that, just like your sort of average like Copilot type tools like AI note taking, or we're using it as ride-alongs for client conversations, and just overall making ourselves a little bit more efficient than we were able to do in the past. So tons of benefits on that side of the world. But as I sort of mentioned, like when it comes to creative, like it's really more like prototyping and just like sort of understanding things. We are using like our own creative within AI for things like testing. We've seen some really great results running like scripts and stuff against virtual audiences, and getting very similar feedback that we would get from like real human focus groups. So that's like a really kind of bonus use case that even if you're not doing that all the time, like it's just a great way to gut check work that maybe might hit a tone that you weren't expecting, or had some sort of like historical pretext that may not have been clear. Like those sort of like gut checks, AI can be like really useful for when working with creative. So yeah, that's kind of how we're using it. And let's get into the conversation.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you all for kind of giving a little bit of a lay of the land from how you've been approaching it. And I think I'd love to start off. So we kind of see how you're using it, but how did you get to where you're using it? What kind of, I mean, from a very practical standpoint, how did you just get started? What were some of the considerations that you put into place? What type of framework did you apply when you were trying to assess kind of your current state and identifying the future state opportunities? Jason, maybe you want to go first on that one.
Sure. I mean, largely our approach to any kind of technology, not just AI, is we have a laboratory approach. So, we have teams of people, whether they're in creative or experiential design or in creative technology, that are constantly looking to innovate. And clearly, a lot of that is also driven by our clients. So, when AI and GenAI tools started to become more commercial, for lack of a better term, and finding their way into culture and into marketing examples. One of the things that we got to quickly was like kind of, well, how are we going to deploy this, and how is this going to be safe for our brands? So really where it started from for us was a brand safety standpoint, and then being able to back the technology into what we're doing, which harkens back to where I'm spending most of my time now. But really it was that kind of dynamic, and then saying, okay, well, what are the boundaries of what's going to be acceptable here? And then how do we create a methodology to ensure that any work that we're going to be doing, or if we use this to deploy work, that it's going to be brand safe.
Right. Lane, you started to speak a little bit about this. Do you want to add on?
Yeah, it's funny when AI, culture is a great word. When AI kind of was like sort of ramp up in culture, it kind of was almost like COVID. It was like one day there was nobody had COVID. All of a sudden it was like we were like at our homes masking up. It just felt like a very quick process, to the point where everybody was like either experimenting with AI, using ChatGPT. Probably the day that ChatGPT broke is, I think, when everything sort of changed. So we recognize that right away, that this is something that minimally people are curious about. And so we did some diligence on our side to kind of take the reins a little bit. We're small enough that we could get all, the entire group of us into like one room to start having discussions about it. So we started, sharing experiences. I did like a weekly series last year where we would sort of pick like one sort of use case for AI. Maybe it's like generating poses for doing illustration or something, and the benefits of doing that, like using AI tools. And then I would give a presentation, and then we would have like an open discussion about like, what do we think about this? Is this useful? Will it save time? Is there copyright concerns, or are there things that we're worried about? And so it was a very like sort of educational way of taking on these new technologies, so that people were minimally exposed to it, even if it wasn't like directly applicable to their job, so that when we're in these like, sort of moments where we're using the tools, there was that familiarity, and then we could at least talk to one another. And then kind of as follow-ups to that, we would like recently we did like an AI fair where like, there's obviously folks in the agency that have really embraced the technology, and they have their own sort of like secret weapons that they've sort of discovered in the process. And so it was a really great opportunity to like meet with your peers, talk about the tricks that they're using it for, to like, once again, spread the knowledge, kind of lift everybody up so that we're all sort of thinking about the benefits of this, and rather being sort of fearful and running away from it. So, one of the benefits of being in a small agency, I guess.
Certainly. So Mike, you've had the opportunity or the blessing or the curse of actually starting with kind of a blank sheet as you've gone into this, since you started your agency with this premise in mind. Curious as to kind of what framework you use to decide where you're going to use it or not.
Honestly, like, as you know, we had an agency called Heat. We exited to Deloitte. We were at Deloitte for 5 years as principals. And the big thing for us was the business of advertising and the brutal margin squeeze that the industry is in. You have incredible downward pressure on pricing because there's so much competition, and you have upward pressure on costs. 70% of our costs are human. The only way to resolve that unbelievably brutal margin squeeze is through technology. And so our idea was, we're going to take technology and alleviate that margin squeeze with it. We started with that in mind. And we actually started before generative AI was broadly distributed. Our thinking was, we're going to use these forms of analytical AIs that we'd been using, to replace econometric modeling and to provide decision support for sort of allocation decisions and things like that. And then generative came not out of left field, because we were using Writer, and we were using some of the old stuff. But when GPT broke, that was sort of the thing where everybody went, whoop. And I'll never forget, I was briefing a journalist for the Wall Street Journal, and they were like, what is this thing anyway? And I just took their last 4 articles, gave it as a reference to GPT, and then instructed it to write their next article. And it started writing their article in like their voice and everything. And they sort of like, their jaw hit the floor. You gotta remember, this is like 2021. And the point of this is, first and foremost for us, it's a business tool. It's a business tool to help make sure the industry that we all work in and that we all care about is sustainable. Because right now the margin squeeze is making it unsustainable.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it.
Yeah. No, that's super helpful and a great context for kind of some of the conversation we'll have today. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I'm curious. So, Mike, you shared that, it's still humans doing the creative. I think other people have talked about, this is about augmentation, not replacement. I am curious to hear from each of you, how are you viewing the role of AI in the creative process? Is it just a tool? Is it for inspiration? Is it changing the way you think about what creative is? I'll toss it up to whoever wants to go first on that one. Or I'll pick somebody. I'll
jump in. I mean, like, there's no one way we use it. Sometimes it's inspiration, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just proofreading. What it always is more options faster for humans to react to. I mean, there's some questions in the Q&A about, what safeguards are in place. The safeguard is always going to be human judgment. And it's the interplay between the human and the AI, the collaboration between the human and the AI. It's just like working with any other form of intelligence, whether it's human intelligence or artificial intelligence. You're never going to completely rely on the intelligence that you're collaborating on, and it's never going to only do one thing. And then every time a new model comes out or a new thing gets pushed, there's new capability. It's pretty cool. So there's no one thing that it does. What I have found is that it does force you to be really thoughtful about what you're trying to do, which is kind of interesting because you have to explain it to the AI, and that's usually a benefit, but there's no one thing.
That's great. Is other people feel similarly or different? And I guess has it done something? Has it pushed the boundaries in terms of what you thought creatively possible in any of your experiments?
So I think for us, or sort of in our experience, my experience, it gets you to learning what not to do more quickly, and that that's always helpful, in that context. Certainly it's a tool, and the human in the loop is always going to be kind of very, very important. But ultimately this technology is an amplifier. Right. And so if you are amplifying, kind of a good idea, you quickly realize that it's a good idea. And if you're amplifying a bad idea, you quickly realize it's a bad idea. So it's a helpful accelerator, in that sense. And really, kind of that's all it is. So it helps. I again, like, I don't believe, kind of to the point that Mike was making earlier, where a client's saying like, oh, this is going to reduce like your costs and your fee, right? And it's like, absolutely not. It's not going to do that. What it's going to do is it's going to allow us to spend more time doing the high value work, the strategic work, the profoundly creative work, and less time, kind of burning for lack of a better term, I guess we called it earlier, the grunt work, right? Or kind of the low value work. And that is, and that's the reality of it. So is it changing that dynamic? I think it is. And is it creating kind of new methods of working and new opportunities? Yeah, it's creating new roles, right? So we're like looking at finding a synthetic media producer, right? Because these are things that didn't exist, 2 or 3 years ago. There wasn't a need for them, but now the volume and the client demand says that we need to have this.
Wow. All right, Lane, how about for you?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, if you're thinking about just the creative process, where we've seen tremendous value is just visualizing ideas. So if you can imagine, like, if you're working on like a script that is like a period piece, like set in the 20s, and you want to have Donald Glover as your lead character, like, you could do all that in Photoshop, absolutely. And that's how we would used to do it. But, back to our sort of original point on this, that's a lot of grunt work. And it's really at the service of just telling the story. The story's still yours. It's still your setting, and it's your characters, and it's your script. But being able to visualize that instantly and like, this is what it's going to look like. It's this kind of mood lighting. It's these kind of angles, like all of that technique that you could just get instantly with at least, something that you can put in front of a client that gets them excited, so they can see how moody that scene is and how good Donald Glover looks in the light in that intense moment. Like, to be able to generate that where it looks to a high degree of realism, like, is such an easier way to sell like sort of complicated storylines or expensive setups. Like, it makes a huge difference for like just for the sales process. It's also kind of just good for, I think Jason sort of leaned in this a little bit of like getting bad ideas out of the way. When I first sort of my first experience with ChatGPT, or like, I think it was like in the fall of like 2023. And I think I was at CES with a lead creative, like a GCD, and he'd never used it. He'd never even tried it. Didn't even know what it was. And he works on Klondike. And I'm sitting next to him, and I wrote, give me 100 things that you would do for a Klondike bar. And it generated it, and I just showed it to him. And once again, he had that jaw-dropping moment where he's like, this would have saved me so much time of just getting rid of all this stuff that we don't want to do. It immediately gets it off the table, and you can start focusing on the stuff that you do want to do. And it's not that all the ideas were bad, but like probably 3/4 of them were bad. And there might be like one gem in there, like, I don't know, eat a whole jar of mayonnaise or something. You're like, oh, maybe we can do something funny with that. Like, but whatever it was a great kickoff for, just getting those creative juices flowing for how we can kind of approach that that particular creative problem. Whether we use it or not, like it's still going to be an interpretation of that starting point, like by the time that you get to the end, regardless.
Yeah, no, that's great. So Lane, I want to stick with you for a second to kick off this next question, which is, I'm curious, what have been the client conversations that you've been having throughout this journey? What's been their role in this journey? What questions and concerns have they had that you've had to navigate? How do you talk about the benefits of it? We've talked a little bit about, the value question, and does it impact the cost of what an agency, or the fees for an agency? But curious as to what those conversations have been, what has been helpful to you to get them on board, or perhaps they've been the ones pushing you to move quickly in this area.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the fee conversation comes in really early, like especially I think on the onset of this tech, where people weren't quite sure all the benefits, and so yeah, immediately the questions are like, wow, could this save us money? Like how would that work? And like, will that reduce your fee? And honestly, our response, and I think Mike said this really well, is no, like we wouldn't reduce the fee, but what you're getting is tremendous value. You're getting more creative time spent on the creative problem. You're getting faster setup time for the strategic considerations and the things that normally like block out time, that take away from really high quality creative. So ultimately, and obviously on the execution side of the end case, like all the different revisions and all the different sort of the resizing and all the thing that is grunt work that isn't really a part of the creative process, we can sort of shave time off that as well, and just really give the time where it's the most useful, which is getting the best, absolute best creative work that you can get. So that's the kind of been a consistent sort of response to that question. And honestly, like the feedback is good. Like people sort of appreciate that. I think the reason why is because, I mean, don't kid yourself here. Like clients are using AI too. Like they all the same, the same use cases that we're developing. They're coming up with their own, either the same or their own, and they understand both the limitations and the value. Like they get it too. One of my biggest clients, they have like their own internal AI tools that they've developed, like in conjunction with Microsoft, that is part of their sort of corporate communications platform. So they can generate insights. They can do a lot of things that we're talking about here themselves. So I think I guess it's important, just from a perspective standpoint, to think about like how are they going to use it, and those decisions that they might ask for, or those those different roles that they're saying could be slimmed down from a value perspective, that might be something that they can pick up completely on their side of things using this technology. So it's a good exchange that we're having. I'm on like an AI task force with my clients, so that we're sharing ideas. We're looking into the tools that are available out in the marketplace, doing prototyping, doing experimentation together. So it's a united way to sort of explore the value here. It's not us versus them, it's us together. And I think that alone, like understanding that we're all kind of like in this together, you actually end up getting a lot of like cross-pollination with use cases that are really, really beneficial to both parties.
I love that you guys are partnering with your clients as you go through this journey. Jason, I'm curious, does it look different from where you sit?
This is weird, right? This whole thing is weird. And it's difficult, to kind of wrap my head around, because I'm old and I've been working in the marketing technology stack for a long time, right? And from CD-ROMs to the web to, all the rest of this. And I've never really sort of had an inflection point like this, where clients are generally very excited about this and absolutely don't understand it, right? At all, right? It wasn't like the web. It's like, let's do this, and here's a ton of money, and go figure it out, and it's okay, whatever you do. It's not that kind of thing, right? And more than that, the regulatory and legal aspects of this are serious. Like, so is this sophisticated technology that, can be really harmful? It can be really harmful because it's really good at amplifying things. My argument is that I would say we don't really even have AI today. We have okay machine learning, and what we have are morph engines, right? And these morph engines do like a okay job of like looking at, vectored information and kind of spitting stuff out. And that really depends on how you build it. The problem is that we have wildly overfitted training models, meaning that the models that are being used are trained, the amount of data and the patterns in the data they're being trained on are very, very small. And so we are, and I know we're going to be talking about bias in a little bit, but the amplification of bias inside of these things is very common, and it's very challenging. And kind of to really answer your question, it's like I am talking to legal counsel for many of our clients, Fortune, 100 companies, where they want to start with, you cannot use generative AI at all for anything that you do. And so the conversation has to be, so you don't want us to send you any emails. Well, what do you mean? Well, I can't send you an email because we have, well, oh, no, that's not what we mean. So we can't send you PowerPoints. Well, what do you mean? Well, so, and kind of like when you start to unpack this in a way, it's like this isn't a binary solution. There's lots of gray areas inside of it, and being able to navigate that requires a tremendous amount of transparency and meaningful understanding of how this technology actually works and how it's going to be implemented in a safe way.
Yeah, no. Mike, I'll let you answer if you've got something you want to add to it. Otherwise, I've got a different question for you.
Go to a different question.
Okay, let's do a different one. So I'm curious to know, is there a use case for AI that has been really a nice surprise to you? Like, what have you been most excited to see this technology do?
Internal communications.
Ah,
Just like taking what is usually the stepchild of every creative engagement and turning it into a real strong suit at almost zero added cost. And then morphing that into like real honest to God internal communications campaigns that, really allow our clients to connect better with the folks who work for them. And just like up leveling the quality of the internal comms has been the most pleasant surprise in all of this.
that's
My
great.
answer.
That's a great application. Anybody else have something that's kind of blown their minds of where it's been really helpful or an unexpected boon?
I did this past year. I worked with a quantum computing company called D-Wave, and using quantum annealing and artificial intelligence, what we were able to do is build out mathematical models for the logistics problems that we face. So if we're going to be doing a tour for a client, and let's say we're going to be doing 200 activations across the country during a specific period of time in certain places, and we need to each of those places have to have certain requirements. We have to have loading and unloading. We have concerns around environmental impact. We have concerns around kind of staffing these things and getting people to, deploy these and sort of managing the people that are there. There's a lot of calculus inside of that, right? And so the amount of planning, that goes into the logistics and making these decisions and sort of making sure that the budgets line up with, kind of what we need to do in order to do this and what the client has. The ability to create these mathematical models, feed them into kind of these machine learning platforms inside of quantum, and get, kind of to Mike's point, like, oh, here's something, can you do this in 5 minutes? No, you can't do this in 5 minutes. We're taking something that would take, 6 months and doing it in like 8 minutes, right? And kind of when you look at the output of that, it's miraculous. So that's certainly a huge dynamic change.
That's fantastic. Lane, anything for you that you're excited about?
I mean, for me personally, because we're a small team here, particularly on the technology side, like being able to generate code, like usable, very functional, well-written code that, or even like bug testing, like code that I've written, is such an efficiency gain. Like I'm able to basically produce like digital properties. Like I would estimate anywhere between 6 to 10 times faster than in the past. And, especially when you're talking about a small team where you don't have a lot of resources, to be able to just quickly, generate, we keep talking about grunt work, but there's a lot of grunt work in coding as well. Like you just think about, things that are commonly done, videos and rollovers and, effects and things that we've just seen before that are commonly used. Like all of that AI does, tremendously well and at a high efficiency. I mean, there's always that danger of like, yeah, you wouldn't necessarily like hand the reins over to AI and say, build an entire like Android app for me or something. Like you still want to be part of the process, kind of treating it like a staff developer that you're overseeing. But within that framework, like it's really efficient, really valuable. And I've just had tremendous success with it.
That's great. All right, so switching gears a little bit and going back to something you've raised, Jason. So, as exciting as all of this is and the opportunities abound, there's certainly plenty of places for agencies to get into a lot of trouble, right? A lot of conversations around ethical and responsible use, deepfake biases, copyright issues, the list can go on and on. How are you navigating these concerns and kind of what guard, as somebody raised earlier, like what kinds of guardrails are you putting in? Mike, you talked about human judgment being a key component of that, but curious as to how you guys are thinking about it.
So first, let me say there's no silver bullet to solving this problem, and it's a lifelong commitment to trying to pay attention to it and solve it. So the first thing was for us to acknowledge that fact and then start to bring people together around having meaningful discussions about how we are going to address this. And I think from a technological standpoint, it's making sure that we have things in place like counterfactual data generation, making sure that we are challenging the potential biases by creating models that are going to challenge the context by which the models and the outputs that they're providing are, and having kind of this adversarial debiasing of the information that's critically important. But primarily, it's being conscious of it. It's having a working group that's always looking at these issues. It's critically understanding kind of what the outputs are, and then again, it's always having that human in the loop, that oversight of what these things are. And again, I cannot stress enough, kind of the overfitting of training models and making sure that there is enough diversity inside of the core training data to ensure that the outputs are reasonable.
That's great. So we've got a lot of questions, so I'm going to ditch the rest of my questions to make sure that we cover the ones from the audience. So jumping right in. First one, I'm in account management and strategic planning, and I feel like there isn't a lot of opportunity to use AI in my day-to-day. What are use cases that are not as much geared towards the creative team members or analysts?
I mean, just speaking from our perspective, we have built the first 2/3 of our platform to support planners and account management. So competitive analysis, audience insight, strategy development. What I would encourage you to do if that's of interest to you is start using, you can either go to GPT, go to OpenAI and use GPT-4V and start uploading things into it and having a conversation with it and see what you can get out of that. Or start poking around and thinking about, start seeing how other people are using it to do exactly what you're discussing. Because that is, I think, in my opinion, one of the most interesting areas.
Perfect. All right, next step, understand that we work hard to set expectations with clients that are putting in safeguards to protect the brand, but what actions are planned if unacceptable material is given to consumers? Do you have a,
Yeah, I
breakdown?
I can speak to that. Like, we would never build a generative AI model that would go out in a manner that would use on-train material or give responses that we wouldn't understand. So there would not be an instance. You have total control when you deploy generative AI over the boundaries of those responses, right? So the engineers, the creative technologists, the computer scientists, whatever you might have, kind of working like that, have total control over the constraints and boundaries, the training data, and also understanding where the responses for the data is coming from, so that you can build these tools or these platforms or these systems in a way to provide you responses that are not going to result in that.
I'll just add, anytime you want to send something or receive something from it, send something to or receive something from an AI in our platform, you have to actually push a button to do it. And then if you want to extract it from our platform and go use it somewhere else, that is a manual process. There is no automated AI generation to public consumption pipeline. That is, I think, a nightmare scenario.
Yeah, you
You
never
need multiple touch points for human judgment along the way.
you never want to do that, and you want to make sure you have constraints and transparency around how you're training and building these systems.
Absolutely.
Unless you count autocorrect and spell check and every other automation that has happened up until generative AI.
Even then, spell check. How many times does spell check screw up client names or acronyms or things like that? I mean, I know you're kind of being facetious, but that sort of further makes the point. There's no,
Even that.
at no point should these things be unsupervised. And always be polite to them, because at some point they will be managing our end of life care. And if there's one thing I've noticed about these things, is that they remember everything.
Very good guidance. All right, so here's a good kind of practical question. So, so much of the conversation on AI is about what it can do. You can use it for data analytics, audience building, strategy, generative design, et cetera. We're at a point now where we know this, but how do you do it? In a very practical sense is the question. Do we need a CTO or other IT consultants to set these technologies up? What does it literally take to set up an AI tool as a meaningful sidecar to create a strategy in production? What insights can early adopters offer about the pitfalls to avoid or pro tips to embrace as we embark our exploration? An example they give is, let's say we've determined that we want to use AI, what we want to use AI for, gone through the problem solution identification phase, vetted and selected tools. So now what? A lot in there.
Yeah. So I think, let's start with, do you need a CTO or an IT consultant? No. Unfortunately, like everything else in your life, if you want it done, you're going to have to actually do it yourself. Like you, whoever's asking this question personally, are going to have to take your use case and break it into small pieces and start knocking off pieces. You can assign it to someone else, but no one else is going to care as much as you do or be as focused on it as you are. Other people may have different opinions about this, but that is my strongly held point of view. The second thing is that when you do figure out how to make your life easier using AI, you're going to bring it to people and you're going to go, isn't this incredible? I've figured out how to cut 5 days out of a 6-day process. And everybody is going to look at you and go, I'm not doing that. There's this weird barrier to adoption. So you've just got to kind of put them in a headlock or gently lead them by the hand and help them through it. And I don't know, that's not a particularly focused or good answer. Maybe one of these other two guys.
I think it's a great answer. Actually, I'm over celebrating because it's totally true. It's like anything else. It's like if you look at old footage of the Today Show talking about email, it's the same thing. Until everybody's using email, like nobody's using email, and it's a very similar, sort of situation that we're in. That seeing the benefits in real time with somebody right next to you that's absolutely loving it, and they're going home at 4 while you're staying till 10. That's going to make the change. That's going to introduce a lot of these processes. It becomes the mother of invention. That's the sort of fact of life that we live in, particularly in a situation where we're working with professionals that have had years and years of skill development, and they have their proprietary stuff that they're in love with, and they have the processes that have worked for them. It's very difficult to get people to go, oh, all that Photoshop work that you used to do to cut out objects out of the background, now you can do, just by clicking a button. That's a transition, and some people are comfortable with that transition, and other people will immediately, run to it. And you have to kind of navigate that, that's been my situation. And I think just showing the benefits and the excitement, enthusiasm from like your peers, like is a huge way to sort of implement those processes.
So I would say I would answer this slightly different. I won't say I disagree. I'm going to answer it slightly differently. So yes, change management is way hard, right? Parking change management to kind of answer the core question: do you need a CTO? Do you need a technologist to help you? The answer is, what do you want to do, right? So it depends what you want to do. Anything that you are going to buy that is a prepackaged solution is going to be very brittle, and it's going to have like really serious constraints around kind of how it functions. So if that suits your needs, if this purpose-built thing suits your needs, then that's fine. But to have kind of this fluid ability to use different types of generative AI and to use different types of AI in order to solve problems broadly, whether it's for analysis or generative design or whatever it is, those are all different tools, and those all need to be organized, trained, and deployed in very, very specific ways. So you're probably going to need help doing that.
Also, if you're one of the things embedded in this question is a sort of like, where do I begin? Go on Coursera and type in generative AI for marketers and get started. Free classes, there's like 50 of them. Just get in there and get going.
Perfect.
My only sort of hand wave for why you might want to have a technologist involved is there are a lot of tools. Like there's like, especially now that you could build AI tools with other AI tools, like you have a proliferation of options out there that do make it kind of a headache to do evaluations. So a big part of my job, it's funny, Jason says he spends 40% of his time talking to lawyers, which it makes me very sad. I spend about 40% of my time just evaluating products. So, I do shave off a lot of those headaches for other people. And when I find a product that is fantastic, that I absolutely love, that's a good starting point for us. Now, we're, like I said, we're a smaller organization, and that works for us. It may not work for everyone else, but it is that kind of laboratory approach that Jason was sort of talking about, that, you can have folks dedicated to this task that then proliferates out, some really great options out there.
All right, perfect. So there's more questions that we're going to have time to answer. I'm going to choose one more, and then I'm going to copy all these and follow up with you guys. So hopefully we can get some additional answers if I can impede upon you. One question is, any advice on implementing AI with RAG, retrieval augmented generation?
Do it.
Just do it. There's the tagline that you liked.
Yeah, I mean, it's like an easy way to make AI more useful. That's like if just using GPT is 101, that's like 201. Get in there, do it.
As of May 2nd, 2024, there's not really a better way of doing it if you're going to want to use either a small or large language model. So that's definitely the thing you want to embrace.
Perfect. All right. I know we are at time. So a couple of things. One, I will follow up to try and get some answers to the questions we did not get to. I do want to make everybody aware there were a few legal questions in here. We have a webinar next week at 3:00 p.m. Eastern time on the 9th, which will be all about the legal environment for AI and agencies. So please join us for that, and we'll answer any of those types of questions that you have. But most of all, I want to thank Mike, Jason, Lane, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your experience and hard-won insight with the rest of our audience. And we greatly appreciate it. And thank you for letting us to continue to pick your brains after the fact.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Also,
thank you.
Anyone who wants to talk about the answers to any of these questions, like, feel free to like reach out on LinkedIn or whatever. I'm happy to, I'll talk about, I'm sure these are the same to these other guys too, but I'll talk about this stuff all day long. I love this stuff. All right.
Perfect. Absolutely. We got questions all day long. All right. Thank you all very much. Thanks for spending your afternoon with us.